Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to set up a base sheet for urban design. There's a few different ways you can do it. I'll talk you through two ways that I typically use, one more than the other. So first off, I'm going to start with my exhibit starter kit DWG that you can get off Blackboard. And this has a lot of the settings already taken care of, and I've got 11 by 17 layouts. I've got a lot of setup work done on this already. So I usually start with this drawing and then do a save as and save this to um, a new file. Basically makes a copy and saves it. So this is base for final project. And makes a copy of that to the new location or whatever location you specify. And this is the file I'm going to actually work in. I'm going to go to model space and just get, it doesn't matter really where I put it because for what we're doing, the coordinates aren't that critical. But if I can, I'll get it close. No reason not to if I can. So I forget what street this is. But it's just north of 290. You guys know where our site is. Let's look at our site. What am I dealing with here? I need to get this street grid drawn, and it's defined by Washington Boulevard, Warren Boulevard, and this street's not labeled, but United Center, we know that's Madison. If you don't know, you can check in maps, and here's our site. Washington, Warren, Madison, and then we'll need some streets, pretty much from Damon to Ashland, more or less. Um, Specifically, we'll have to have from Wood Street to Paulina at the least, right? So that's Wood, Hermitage, and Paulina. So maybe what I'll do, so I can remember that, because my memory's going, maybe I'll download that image and save that file and just bring it in CAD, not to scale or anything, just as a sort of reminder of my area and what I'm working with. I'll worry about getting things drawn to scale and putting them in the correct coordinates later. So if I go to my downloads folder, I can see there's the image I just downloaded. Don't look at my horrible file management here. I don't have my CAD folder synced to my home computer yet. So I'm just going to drop this into my main box sync directory where I've been putting all my other files. Now, there's a couple of ways of bringing images into AutoCAD. One way that I demonstrated before was to use the external reference palette and attach image, but actually you can also just drag and drop an image in. So it's off screen, but I'm dragging in the image.png file. It asks me for if you watch the command line, asks me for an insertion point and a scale. I'm just eyeballing this, asks me for rotation. I'm just gonna hit enter and take the default. So now I've got this reference in CAD where I can refer to it. Notice that the streets are not square to the page. That's the Chicago grid that's accurately drawn here in this aerial. It's a little bit off square. I'm not going to deal with that. I want my lines to be square. It's just so much easier. I can use ortho mode to keep things square. It's going to make my life a lot easier. For the kind of work that we do at this conceptual site plan level, it doesn't much matter. Scale matters because I might need to get some quantities off this. If I need square footage of buildings, if I need to calculate an FAR or something, I want to be able to pull true numbers out of CAD. So scale matters. For right now, what we're doing, coordinates don't matter so much. Okay, so the next thing I need to draw is I'm going to draw these center lines, but I need to know how wide the rights of way are and the size of these blocks. That information is contained in the old Chicago 80-acre tax maps that I gave you a link to. So I'm looking for this area, but I have to sort of spec it out, I think. Well, let's see. Let me just try zooming in on it first and see if it works out. I think I'm going to need to like ask it for an address though, but let's find out. So we're somewhere around here. Actually, we're pretty close to here. all this. So you can search by address, you can search by intersection, but what I'm interested in is map layers, and I want to see the 80-acre map for the area I'm in. And oh, okay, so it showed up. When you zoom in beyond a certain zoom scale, this is the 80-acre map I'm referring to. You see this hand-drawn vintage stuff. So this has a lot of good information for us, and I'm interested in two things here. The street right-of-way width and the block size. And with that information, I can draw up a base for engineering. So where is this information found? Well, if I zoom in on the intersection here on Madison and Damon, Damon's easy to see. See that 66 foot? That's telling me the right-of-way of Damon Avenue is 66 feet there. And if you don't know the city, well, maybe track it for a few blocks and see if you can get confirmation. You'll see a lot of 66s. It's a very common right-of-way width. Note Lake Street is 80 feet. And I usually like to get confirmation in a couple of places, but I know the city pretty well. I know here's another 66. So I'm pretty confident that Damon is consistently 66 feet wide. But that's also a little bit off our patch, but it's a good place to start. Hell, maybe I'll just start there. I'll draw. I know something now, so I'll draw it in. Let's make a few new layers. Note that Excel spreadsheet I posted on Blackboard. I don't have it open. That gives you some idea of how the layers, how I recommend naming layers. So here's a new layer, and I'm going to call it PL for property line dash CL. I also opened up Box, so in our share folder area in the CAD ref directory, take note of this quick reference Excel spreadsheet. And here you can see the logic behind the modules of the layers. So PL is anything related to property line. That includes center line, right-of-way, easements, setbacks, all that stuff. I tend to consider that the controlling prefix, even though these are existing. I won't put an EX-PL in front of it because I don't want to get into it, but PL is a classification that usually is dealt with in its own group. So do I have those layers? I do not. Oh, I have the PLCL. I'm going to make that printable. I'm going to make this a skinny black line like number 11, and I'm going to give it the center line type. And I'm not seeing a lot of line types here, so I'm going to go ahead and load them up. I'll just select them all and say, okay, I'm going to reload all selected line types. So now that's my PLCL. I'll have another one called PL for property line dash right-of-way, and that's going to be the right-of-way lines. I'm going to make this a little thicker, maybe yellow, and right-of-way is typically shown solid or a double dash. Double dash is properly called a phantom line. I'm going to make my double click on that to make my center line layer current, and I'm just going to draw a line for the center line of Damon Avenue with F8 ortho on, so it's perfectly vertical. And I'm not seeing any line type in here. Why not? Let me check my MSLT scale and make sure that's set to 1, and it's not. That's set to 0. MSLT scale, that's model space line type scale, and you're going to want that set to 1. Then if I do a regen, you see I suddenly see line type. All right, we decided that we discovered Damon's a 66 Avenue right-of-way, so I'm going to use the offset command, type in the value of 33, and offset my center line in both directions. Now my offset lines, I'm going to change their layer definition to PL right-of-way. And there's Damon. I'm just going to go ahead and move this onto the picture so it's sort of close. Just to sort of, I don't know, I just like it there. So it's around here somewhere. You typically run into the same right-of-way widths again and again in Chicago. I did a whole study on this when I was working on a BRT project for a Metropolitan Planning Council, and I was looking at the infrastructure for BRT, and it's an interesting subject when you see how few how few rights of way in Chicago are wide enough to handle BRT. Anyway, so that's Damon. That's 66 feet. And then let's look at Walcott. Bit of a side street. I see a 66 there too. Another 66. I'm going to go ahead and accept 66 foot as the right-of-way width for Walcott. I don't believe that changes over time. It's a pretty consistent side street. Notice how it used to be called other things. Interesting. I love these old maps. There's always something interesting going on with them. Now the question is, how far away is Walcott from Damon? Well, I'm going to need to check the size of this block. So a typical Chicago lot, as shown here, is 25 by 125. Now here it's 124.5, and here it's 125. I'm not going to work to that level of precision. I'm going to call this 125 in both cases. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 24 lots times 25. What does that come out to? 24 times 25 is 600. And I should have known that off the top of my head. The city block is 600 feet, but I forgot that I knew that. So I can offset this now 600. But I'm not offsetting the center line. Of course, I'm offsetting the right-of-way line. And then we discovered that Walcott is also 33 feet. So I can offset this 33 feet twice. I'm going to use my favorite button, the Match Properties button, to change this to a center line. So now I've got Damon and Walcott set up. At some point, you'll probably wish you had this 80-acre base in your drawing. It's much easier to trace if you do. So looking back at that website, if you pick a point somewhere in the area of interest, you can actually download that 80-acre page. I'm having some sort of glitching going on here. It's not displaying, but I think I can still download this. And you can background a PDF in CAD just as well as a JPEG. And at some point, it's easier to just do that because you'll be going back and forth between the website trying to get these numbers in there. So here you see the proper 80-acre page. Any guess on why they call it an 80-acre map? And you can see here's Madison, Damon, here's our area of interest. You might need a couple of these to cover the area. So what you would do is maybe set up a spreadsheet. It's about an hour's work, I would say, to flash in all this existing stuff. You don't actually need the individual lots. You just are really interested in the rights of way and the block shapes. And you could do that with this information. And this is pretty much the best place to get this information. This is record information. And if you're working in the city, this is the grid. This is where it's from, and this is how to get it. I'm not going to take the time to make you watch me construct the entire city grid. And you're probably thinking, good God, there must be an easier way to do this. And of course there is, but that's if you've got some GIS chops and some GIS assets. So if you've gone through 461, if you're a CUP student, you should have some basic GIS chops. And what you may not have been doing, however, is keeping track of your assets. That's something that you learn to do. So here's a map that I have that's just got all basic general reference information for the 5-county area. I've got it set up by county and all the stuff that I typically need. All publicly available, nothing special about what I have. This is all stuff that you can just download from various sources. The county sources are typically the best. And the trick here is that you just need to export this to a DWG file. What you want to make sure, however, before you do this, is that your information is projected correctly. And so to do that, I'm looking at these 2018 parcels, and you can see these are all the blocks that I would have to draw in. And it's going to save me a lot of time if I've got my GIS going. I'm just going to check the properties on these 2018 parcels and confirm that they're on Illinois State Plane coordinate system. Otherwise, I'll need to project them. And good God, I don't want the entire Cook County set. So I'm just going to do a selection that I'm just going to grab my information just physically in the area that I'm interested in. And we can see this is on Illinois State Plain East, so I'm good to go. And now using the select features, I'm just going to go ahead and do a window that covers the whole area. It's just as easy to take a bunch and too much as too little. In fact, when you're doing this context sort of map, make sure you take um, more than you think you need. It never fails if you take an aerial image or base parcels, you wish you had a little more coverage. So something like this, especially when it's shapes and not an image, which can add size to your files, take some extra. Make sure you've got enough. So this is a setup in a network environment on my OneDrive, unfortunately, and so it takes a little while to do even basic things like select parcels. So I'm going to let that grind for a bit while it selects. Go back to AutoCAD. This is going to save me a lot of time instead of having to construct all these blocks, but certainly can do it that way just by keeping track of the distances in the blocks and construct the city blocks. In another way, we could just, for the level of detail we're working at for this area, we could just accept 250 by 600 or 300 by 600 as a city block and work with that for the kind of concepting we're doing. The only downside with that is if we're not drawing the block size accurately and we try and background a photo, it won't work. So if we were going to do this without a photo, which is certainly, could do, we could use schematic blocks at 300 by 600 and it would work out. It would be fine. It would get us working quickly. I'm gonna check back and see if my parcels are selected. But before I do that, let's take a little side trip to Google Earth, and I'll show you a little trick that I use for getting aerials into other applications at the right size, actually into CAD at the right size. So here's my Google Earth app, and you can see I've got this parcel that you recognize. I drew out this polygon. I'm going to turn that off. I just want the aerial image. I'm also going to turn off everything else. I don't want to see those lines. I don't want to see, God forbid, the horrible street names. Just what I'm looking for. Here's a shortcut to make watching this video worthwhile. To get back to plan view, just R, the R key. That will get you back to north up and no tilt on the camera. You want perfectly flat plan view when you're exporting images from Google Earth. So what I'm going to do is draw a path, just a line that's kind of off my area of interest. I don't want to see this line, but I want to know how long it is. And you can see where this is going already. I'm going to take this measurement in feet, and it's, what do you know, even 1,400 feet. And I'm just going to say, okay, so that's this white line at the bottom. That's 1,400 feet long. It's really useful for me to know that because I can bring this JPEG into AutoCAD, and it's not coordinatized, but I can align that visually with a line that I draw that's 1,400 feet long. And all of a sudden, I'll have a base aerial that's to scale, more or less. And that is another way of approaching a base sheet to start with the image, and then you can flash in schematic blocks. Close enough for what we're doing, absolutely. R, I hit R chronically in Google Earth to make sure I'm always in plan view. And then I'm going to go to File, Save Image. And if you're running Google Earth Pro, which you should be, why not take the maximum resolution? And also, I'm going to go to the map options and turn off all this stuff that I don't need. All I'm interested in is the image. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that image. And you're going to not look while I do horrible, do as I say, not as I do file management here. And it's a good idea when you're doing this to, in the name of the actual file that you're creating, add the photography date. As aerial photography becomes sort of the norm, the first question many people ask is, when was that photo taken? And I forgot to check, but I'm going to take note after I export this image and correct this file name so that it contains that. Um, the years go by very quickly, and it's nice to know when your photography is out of date and when you can update it. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm saving this to my downloads folder, which obviously I don't recommend. You have a dedicated folder set up, and I'm going to save this Google Earth image. And I'll show you how quickly we can use that in CAD, a very sort of straightforward process to bring that in. You saw we just drag and dropped an image in one time. Oh, I said I would correct the file name, didn't I? Google Earth. I'm going to close the Save Image um, toolbar, and then I can see my imagery date at the bottom here is 5/23/2018, and I'm going to. It's off the screen, so you can't see it. But I'm coding that into the name of the file so that in the future, which I know it seems like the future is never going to get here, but it is, I'll know when this photography is from. And that's also a note that should be on in my fine print on whatever I produce. So I'm dragging and dropping now. You'll recall you can do the external reference and file place, but I'm getting kind of lazy, so I'm dragging and dropping. And notice at the command line is asking me for the insertion point. I don't have any coordinates at this point, so I'm just going to pick a point. I'm just going to eyeball this, give it some size, accept the rotation, and there's my white line that's going to help me to get this thing to be the right size. I just eyeballed this. It's also probably on the wrong layer. I should have a separate image layer for this, and oh my God, of course I don't. So for these base images, I usually have an image prefix, and I may have many images in a file. I may have zoning, I may have a tax map, who knows. Um, so always more layers are a better way to go than fewer layers. So I'm going to select this entity, this image, and I'm going to change its layer definition to image Google Earth. I can draw order this to the back, DR enter, it's selected already, draw order to the back, and now it's going to be under any line work that's drawn. But how do I get this to be the right size? Okay, I'm just going to make this layer current. Here's the shortcut key, make current. The shortcut keys are great. These are new. When I started in CAD, none of these were available. So whatever I select will be the current layer. I'm just going to select that image and notice that now image Google Earth is my current layer. I'm just going to eyeball a line that traces over the line that I drew in Google Earth. I'm going to turn off ortho because of course, I didn't draw a perfectly straight line. And there's the line. And how long is it? It's 9,870 feet. And what did I say it should be? 1,400 feet, I think I said. So home, I'm going to copy that line. So now I have two lines that are the wrong size. What I'm going to do is make this line the right size. How might I do that? Well, there's a few ways you can make the line the right size. An easy way, if you remember your Euclidean geometry, is to draw a circle, C enter, from that endpoint, and 1,400, that's the radius. So you can see my size is way off here, way off. And if I then use the trim command, I have a line that's exactly 1,400 feet. I'm going to undo that and erase that and show you another way. On the modify pull down, there's a command called lengthen. This is a multi-step command. You can see at the command line, I've got different options for lengthen. I can key in a delta, which is a change, a percent, say I want this to be 50% the size it is, dynamic, which will let me visually change the length of it, or I can key in T total and give it the absolute length I want it to be. And that's another way of getting a line to be the exact length you want it to be. And I can check it. It's 1400. 1400, was that right? Not 14,000? Looks kind of small. Now I'm going to use the align command. I'm going to select both the line that I drew on top of my image line and the image itself. Type in AL enter for align. I know the align command is up here somewhere, but I lose track of where I'm very much a shortcut key based CAD user. And now this works by setting up two or more from and to points. So first source point, endpoint to endpoint, second source point, other endpoint to other endpoint, and a third source point doesn't exist. So I'm just going to hit enter and scale the object based on the alignment points. Yes, that's the whole point of this exercise. So this should be the right size, and it can't be. I must have met 14,000. So it's late. I've done this in this video in segments. Let's look at the properties of this path again. The measurement is, of course, no, that's 1400. That should be good. So that should be good. So let's redo this and trust the numbers here. And let's see what happens if I move it from I think this is Madison and Walcott. Let's move it to where we think Madison and Walcott is. I'm going to erase this other one that I put in there. And it's going to want to detach it too. All right, so that should be right. And it actually is looking pretty good. You got to sort of trust the math on here. Typically, right-of-ways in Chicago are from back a walk to back a walk, and this is actually lining up pretty good. So just a little 1 a.m. freak out, nothing to worry about. This is probably right. If I offset one of my blocks 600 just as a test, yep, that's the block, 600-foot block. So this is good to go. So here's another way of setting up a base. And now you could fudge in some blocks. That's a perfectly valid way to go also. But this is good right now. This image is the right size, but it's of course not in the right place. Let's go back to GIS. And by now, good God, my parcels surely must be selected, and they are. And now I'm going to right click and data and export to CAD. Maybe that's an option you haven't used before in GIS. And my network's going really slow this morning. But I'll give this a second and it'll pop up. Here we go. And this is going to, I checked the projection, you'll recall, and I'm going to export these directly to a DWG file. I'm going to make sure I'm putting this in the right place. In my case, this is the wrong place. But you, of course, are going to do much better and put it in the right place. Actually, I'll use my box sync file. That's where I've been saving stuff. UPP465, and this is Cook Parcels 2018. These tend to not change so much over the years, but there are a lot of years available. No reason not to use the latest. And you may notice already there's a lot fewer blocks that are visible here. The 80-acre maps show all the underlying parcels. This shows the current ownership. So for example, United Center, I think on the 80-acre map, they still show all the underlying lots. Here, we just show the current lines of ownership, the pins. And I'll save that. And this is just a one-step thing, and it's okay. Actually, it usually happens pretty quick. Compared to some other grinding that happens in GIS. It's going to dump it back into this file, and I'll just remove that and then open it up in CAD and see what I've got. Okay, you can see it dropped in these additional blocks. This is the CAD. It brings in multiple layers. I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. Before I finish up with GIS, let's look at some we can also export a coordinatized photo out of here. This, I'm using the Cook County map service here. To do that, you add data from online and search Cook County, and it's nice high res um, aerial imagery. It's a little nicer than the basic aerial photography that you get in the typical base map aerials. So I think this is my area, um, more or less. I can maybe zoom out a little bit. Like I said, get a little more rather than a little less. Something like this. I think I'm in the ballpark here, right? And I'm going to export this map, but this time it's going to be coordinatized. Make sure nothing else is on because this is going to export a picture, but a coordinatized picture. And here I'm going to use the command file export map. And this is going to write a TIFF file at a resolution you specify with a coordinatized world file. That's a TFW file, I believe, and that's going to give it coordinates. So let's see, where's my, I'm going to go ahead and save this as ESRI aerial and save that out. Meanwhile, we have those parcels that we wrote. Let's go back to CAD and see what happened with that. Here's my parcel files that I right-click data, export to CAD. Let's open that up. You usually get an error message that says it doesn't recognize it, but here it is. Here's the squares. Here's the polygon, sorry, that we wrote out of GIS, and you can see saved me a lot of drawing time. What I'm going to do is copy and paste these into, and notice my coordinates down near my status line. I'm in these high numbers, and if you recall from GIS, that's a good sign that we're on the Illinois State Plane Coordinate System. I could have checked the coordinates of a given intersection or something, keep me on track, but this is all kind of so fast and easy that it's easy to redo something if you see an error. So I'm going to do a Control A, select all, right click. I'm going to clipboard, copy with base point. And when you're dealing with coordinates, your base point is always 0, 0. So I'm copying from 0, 0 in this file and pasting to 0, 0 in this file. Alternatively, I can clipboard paste to original coordinates. That'll put it in the same place. And I'm not seeing anything here. So let me zoom out a little bit. I'm not surprised because I just dropped this in and ballparked this. So you can see here is where it actually is. And this makes more sense. My sense of scale is a little off here. We know 290 and it's right on 290. And these are probably where the blocks really are. This obviously saves me a lot more time. Let's look at a one of our layouts. I'll double click in here and start zooming in to get some idea of maybe how this is going to lay out. I'm going to move this reference stuff out for now so I can get a whole idea. This is really starting to look like something. So that came in with its own layer definition, and it's the name of the file, but I'm going to call that, actually, I'm going to move that to the existing lots layer. By doing, the way I'm going to do that is to select one or a couple, maybe there's some lines in here, right click, select similar, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to the PL existing lots. And you can see the color changed, and now hey, it's really starting to look like a map here. But actually what I'm going to also do is on the existing lots, I'm going to make a suffix and identify it as county parcels in case I this helps me to know what I'm doing. In 10 minutes, I'm going to forget what I've done 10 minutes ago. So okay, and here you can see this problem that we face with Chicago. It's out of square to the page. It's about, I believe, I calculated in GIS once. I think it's about 1.25 degrees out of square. Nothing wrong with that. That's accurate. That's how it is. But it tends to create an unpleasant situation for us where we like it. We want this to be square to the page, don't we? There's a couple of ways of fixing this. Both of them are a little maybe more advanced than I want to get into right now. Hey, let's see how our aerial fits this with these blocks. Now I need to know. Now it becomes apparent that I have no idea where I am. And one of the things that's going to help me is changing the color of the blocks so that it's not, or I can change I can put a little fade on the aerial so it's not so garish. And then I can see the lots on top of it, maybe even a little more. Fade and transparency are really useful when you're putting together your final map. This looks like it's too faded out, but remember, we're going to draw on top of that. So we don't want an aerial that's actually going to be, so heavily saturated with color. So I'm going to turn my parcels back on and try and remember where the hell I am. But looking at the fit here, I can see that it's actually not bad. And if I'm just going off a sort of intersection. I thought I was more familiar with this area than I am. And I'm actually a little lost. But if I move the center of the image to the center of an intersection, I can see that my blocks are lining up pretty good. So once I figure out where the hell I am and move this picture to the right place, I'm sure it's off now, I'll be in pretty good shape. A visual check tells me that this is looking pretty good. So I just need to refer back to GIS. I'm turning the parcels back on over the aerial. We'll get some idea of where we are. But wait a minute, what about that other coordinatized aerial that we cut from GIS? So to bring that in, it's a command called map insert. I'm going to type it in, MAPIINSERT, map insert. And this is how you bring in coordinatized geometry. Images. I'm going to just say open that, and oh, look at this. Dropped it right in place. If it's working, you shouldn't have to fuss with any of these settings. This is all um, uh, auto-filled by the world file. That's the projection file that we cut when we exported this. That was a little checkbox in GIS. Make sure you create the world file when you're exporting your map. I'm just going to say OK. And lo and behold, I was way off with this, of course. And here's my actual location. I'm going to give this some fade and DR draw order it to the back. And look what a nice fit that is. GIS has made me very lazy. I used to have to do this stuff. I did CAD a long time before I did GIS. And GIS is really sort of working well with CAD now. In the early days, did not work so well. Now it's works amazingly well. I'm going to make a new layer, image ESRI. Just in case I want to use the two images. The ERSI images, they're nice. They're actually very good. They're just a little garish. Sometimes I soften these up a little bit in Photoshop. The Google Earth images tend to be a little smoother, but I do sometimes convert these to black and white. or fade them out so that they don't have such, so much presence. I'm going to go ahead and change this layer definition to image Esri. Doesn't change anything, but I'm just keeping my P's and Q's in order. I can visually, remember this Google Earth is never coordinatized, so I'm just visually aligning it. So I can use something like, the corner of a paint stripe or the corner of a sidewalk to align them. So here I'm using the corner of the sidewalk. Turn off Object Snap F3. You can see my size match was pretty good. When I eyeballed this at 1400 feet, right? This is not a bad matchup here. It's actually pretty good. And it's different photographic sources. So if we see a little change in the aspect of the building, that's to be expected. It was shot at a different angle. You might see a difference in shadows, and you can see there a different time of year it was shot. So, but a pretty fair match. However, I'm going to go with the coordinatized layer, the ESRI photo, and I'm going to freeze that Google Earth layer, but I have it in case I need it. So now let's see what's going on with our layout. I'm going to double click to make the viewport active, P enter for pan, and now we're starting to see a little more about how we might use this. One thing that's kind of weird is we're not seeing how it's actually going to plot. Right click on Page Setup Manager, and one thing you always want to have is what you see is what you get set up. So we're using our UPP465. We're going to display plot styles and OK and close. And now we see the black lines against the photo. It's looking pretty sharp. What's the scale? Not sure. I'm going to take a guess. Z enter 1/200 XP times paper. That's 1 inch equals 200 feet. We're a little too far out. Return, same command, 1/100 XP, 100 times paper. And I think that might be a little closer. I've actually forgotten, to tell you the truth, what my study area is. So let me refresh my memory, bring that up in Google Earth, and I'm going to put this on a different screen and refer back to it. So I'm making sure that I'm getting enough coverage here. And it looks like it starts with this. It's this L-shaped parcel here. I'm going to pan. I'm going to center this in the page. And maybe I'll just make a new layer. I'll call this PL for property line dash study area. Make it red, just so I don't go bonkers forgetting. I'm so like out to lunch. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'll make this dashed just so I can keep track of where I'm at. I'm gonna make sure double click to make that current, and I'm going to draw a boundary just so I pline for polyline, just so I remember what my study area is. And I'm just going to go to I'm going to visually just sketch it to the middle of the streets, just so I remember. This will help me keep track of what my actual study area is. So I've got a lot of extra context, and this is good. C to close it. The dashes are too big. I'm going to change the LT scale of just this one particular entity to 0.25. And if I go back to my layout, I can see my study area is centered pretty nice. It may be that I want a little more context. Maybe at 100, if I select a viewport, it tells me I'm at standard scale 100. Maybe that's just a little too close. I can use in-between scales. You don't want to make a habit of it. 100 scale is a good round scale, easy to start to understand. I like to work at 100 or 50. But if it has to be Z enter 1/100 120, so be it. I need a little more context. Um, I don't want to shortchange what I'm showing. So that's looking pretty good. Remember polylines you can give a width to. So what if I give this a global width of like 5? And now this is pretty clear what my study area is. I'm not seeing my dashes. Why is that? Remember that PSLT scale command, system variable actually, that I told you about? Well, there's, or MSLT scale, there's also a PSLT scale. You want to make sure this is set to 1 also. And then I'm going to type in REA for regen all, and I start to see my line type come across. Okay, so I'm in pretty good shape. This is a pretty nice looking base map. I can do some design with this. I almost think that I might need multiple viewports to get my message across, but this certainly gets me going. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You can't take this rotation. I don't disagree with you. How can we fix that? We never want to mess with coordinates. Coordinates are what they are. So this started out as just some stuff that we drew, and but the drawing file always had coordinates, and it's got the 6 county coordinates, but we just weren't paying attention to them. But once they're there, you want to respect them. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to make a baseline that is going to be our baseline for the project. And I'm going to use the Madison Street right away to define that. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this Z underscore. That's my shorthand to myself for a layer that I want at the end. It's a reference layer, and I'm going to call this guidelines. I'm going to give this a layer that typically I don't use when I'm drawing, like a pink or something that is bright on the screen, but I know I'm probably not plotting. And I'll give this maybe a hidden 2 and make it current. So I'm going to set up a baseline, L enter. I'm going to use the Madison Street right away by snapping from the endpoint at one side of our project area to the endpoint at the other. Now, if you're familiar with GIS, you know that it's too accurate. Every little parcel is a different thing, right? This is one shape, this is another. That's why I didn't bring in the center lines. I have them, I got no use for them because they're made up of 1,000 little segments. For what I do, I need some simple, clean lines. I'm going to select the midpoint, right click, scale, make that 10. So this just goes. All right, this is a non-plotting layer. Did I make it non-plotting? I did not. Make sure it's a non-plotting layer. I never want to see this. This is just for me. So this is what I want square to the page. I'm going to set up a custom coordinate system that is square to this line, and all of a sudden our life will become so much easier because we can do things like just draw a rectangle, and it won't be out of square with all our lots the way it is now, right? Okay, so how do we do this? So you see this icon in the lower left? That's the UCS icon. And UCS stands for User Coordinate System. When you see this little square at the vertex of the X and Y axes, that little square tells you that you're on World Coordinate System. For us, the World Coordinate System is Illinois State Plane. I'm going to set up a custom coordinate system, a true UCS, based on this object. There's lots of ways you can set up a custom UCS. I could define it in degrees. By the way, what is this degree here? Angle of 2. It looks like I'm not showing enough decimal places in my angles. I'm going to go to the AutoCAD upper left-hand corner, drawing utilities, and units. And I'm going to make sure that I have to work a little more accuracy, at least like 2 decimal places. And let's check that now. And 1.69, no, I guess 1.25. Okay, so that's what my rotation is going to be. So the way to set this up is I'm going to type UCS, And you can see that it gives me all kinds of options because we can work in 3D in CAD if we want to. Actually, we're working in 3D now, we just don't know it. What I'm going to use is OB object. So I'm going to type in OB enter, and it's going to say pick the object. I'm going to select that line, and notice that my cursors are now skewed, but parallel to that line. And boy, is that going to make things easier for us. Now, as I can't live with these cursors being crooked and work that way, so I'm going to type in the word plan and take the default. Current UCS. And what that's going to do is kink my world, kink my world, to my UCS, okay? And this is the best way to do it. Trust me, there's other things, there's D-view twist, there's all kinds of ways of doing it. This is the best way to do it. Your stuff is going to look off, but we haven't adjusted our coordinate systems. Anytime you want to, you can type in UCS and go back to world. I'm going to undo that. So I went to the trouble to create this coordinate system. I'll type in UCS one more time, and I'm going to, it's not showing up as an option, but I'm going to hit S for save, and it's going to ask me for a name, and I'm going to call this Madison. All right, this way when I forget everything that's going on, I know that my UCS is keyed on the Madison. Okay, let's go back to our layout. Double click inside here and notice it's skewed. I have to do it again, plan, enter current UCS, and do my zoom again. And UCS, restore Madison, then plan and current UCS, and it's kinked. There we go. Square to the page, and it's just going to look better, right? It's just going to look better. Z, enter for zoom, 1/120 XP. Think of XP as times paper. P, enter for pan, and this is our site. This is a good general view for some sort of context, right? It's maybe got a little more coverage to the east than we need. I think we need to show the United Center. I'm going to hit exit and come out of this. Depends. It's very rare that one drawing will be served everything you want to do by one view, but this is a really good general place to start. I'm going to select that viewport, and with F8 on, maybe kick it over an inch, maybe even another inch. And this will give me a place where I can maybe put some notes or something. Actually, I don't like that. I'm going to undo that. But it's the type of thing we can do. Once we figure out how we want this page to lay out, we can always adjust the viewport. It's just a rectangle. You can stretch it and move the corners and whatnot. Okay, so this gets us to a good place. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and save this file to Box. So I would encourage you to work through this yourself, but I understand the realpolitik of it. Sometimes, hey, grab it and go if that's what you need to do. But I hope you got the idea of where this came from. The thing about this is, however, I have a lot. First, I should do a save. I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot. I've got 2 images. I've done a lot of stuff in here that won't be saved with the file. So what I'm going to do, instead of just posting this DWG file, I'm going to publish this to what's called an e-transmit, and this is going to create a zip file that includes those images, because remember, any aerials, any pictures, any PDFs, they're just placed like a database placed into the DWG file. So they're not typically included in the DWG file. So I'm creating what's called an e-transmit, and it's the quickest way to create sort of a package of everything that's in the file that you might need. So you can see here's the Esri aerial TIFF, here's the JPEG from Google Earth, here's the printer PCS that I used, here's the probably the plot file table. All the elements of the file that UPP465, you should have that already. This is if you're working with other firms, this is typically what you do when you send them everything that they need. If I had other drawings XREF'd into this, I can include those at this point also. And I'm going to say OK. And this is going to be, I'll post this to Box, and I'll just leave this name as it is. Well, actually, I'm going to call this base 02, just so you don't confuse it with the original base that I've posted that doesn't have any of this stuff in here. So if you want to, if you're like, hey, I want to get moving on the design here, the semester's been over for days and I haven't done any design in this alleged design class. Okay, grab it, unzip it, set it up in your directory how you want it. You'll probably need to reconnect the XREF path to get the images to show. But you'll be good to go. What else do I need to do? I need to add center lines, maybe emphasize the blocks as opposed to the parcels, using another layer and changing line weight. But it's a real solid start, and it's something you can start flashing in your design with. All right, this is way too long. It's way too late. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about this stuff, always feel free to email me. Thanks.